The first half is meant to represent Blake. The second half is meant to represent Yang.
RWBY is a 3D animated series by Rooster Teeth. Check it out at roosterteeth.com.
Hello Internet, welcome to another episode of Soundtrack Analysis from RWBY's Soundtrack. I'm your host Josh. Today we're going to take a look at how Nevermore portrays the growth of two characters, or three, both musically and lyrically. The first thing I'm going to cover is the strongest musical reference I found, which is the piano solo in Nevermore. It's not obvious, but when you realize it, you can't unhear it, that it represents both Blake and Yang. And I'm going to talk about why. First things first, let's take a listen to it. Now that isn't the bluesiest thing you've ever heard. I don't know what is. Honestly, it's so cool. The first half is meant to represent Blake. The second half is meant to represent Yang. Why? One of the easiest hints I found was that Blake is often represented in the show musically by a piano arpeggio when she fights. I remember in Volume 1, Chapter 8, when she fights the Nevermore, she's going Tarzaning everywhere. That's a verb I just made up. There's all this piano nonsense going on, and it's just like a piano solo. It's huge and it's beautiful. Another time where we get lots of piano solos that I can remember clearly is in Volume 5, Chapter 10, when Blake and Elia fight. In there's lots of agile, elegant, moving around like a ninja style, and I think that's what the piano arpeggios are trying to convey. This piano solo is obviously a nod to those piano arpeggios because it's a fast piano arpeggio, you know. It even sounds like the introductions from Shadows. I'm gonna go into that, I'm gonna bring it up.
Music theory incoming, be warned! You can skip to the lyrical analysis over here in this timestamp.
Before we delve into the nice, lovely details, we have to take a look at the color scheme I used to analyze this piece. Now there's three colors that we're going to take a look at. Green, blue, and red. Pretty easy, right? Green notes are those notes that are also part of the chord that they play over. For example, we've got a C minor, and this is a G, which is the fifth to the C minor, which is part of the chord, so I colored it green. The blue notes are those notes that are not part of the chord they're playing over, but they're still part of the scale. So this second isn't part of C minor, but it's still part of C Aeolian. And finally, the red notes are not part of the chord or part of the scale. So we can definitely see that they're in order. The green notes feel like home, the blue notes are tense but interesting, and the red notes are dissonant. In the first half, we get lots of green and a little bit of blue notes, but the majority is green, which is the right characteristic for our piano arpeggio. And especially in the first quarter, the majority of the blue notes are seconds. If we compare this to From Shadows, we get lots of the same thing. Most of the notes are green, but there's a lot more blue in here than in the piano solo from Nevermore. And most of the blue notes are seconds, so we still get the same feeling. So you can see the first quarter is definitely a reference to that. Now something you'll notice while looking at all these green notes and blue notes is the one red note that there is in the first half. And it's during the transition to the second half of the solo. This is a minor second that's chromatically approaching the first degree. Now, why do I say chromatically approaching? Is it because I think I'm clever? Yes, but also because approach means that a dissonant note leads to a consonant note, and chromatic means that it's based on the interval of a half step. So the interval between the minor second and the first is only a half step. That's why it's a chromatic approach. Now, this is red because it's obviously not in the scale, and it's especially dissonant because the chord that plays under it not only has the first, obviously, but also has the natural second. That doesn't really sound extremely dissonant because the dissonant note only lasts like 10 milliseconds, but it's still a very brief cluster, because the first, the minor second, and the natural second are all just a half step away. So why is it there? Why did Jeff ruin his work? He's not an idiot. He's very clever actually, because he's just foreshadowing. He's foreshadowing that the next part of the solo is gonna be bluesier and darker. He's even gonna use that degree again as a chromatic approach to the first, and that's gonna be even more fulfilling because this first is on a stronger beat than this first. The second half sounds dissonant, and I'm gonna prove it. I basically put a reverb effect on the whole solo, and we're gonna see how that affects the sound of it. Now, this was fine. The first quarter was fine. This was as it was going down here, it was getting a little clustery and muddy. This was horrible. If we see here, this should just be as dissonant as this. It has the exact amount of blue notes, it's 5, and 3 of them are in a row, just like here, and it has 1 red note. So why is it more dissonant? To answer that question, I'll have to introduce a new color scheme. New color scheme! So this is a new color scheme. Each note has a color, but this time it doesn't depend on what chord plays under it, but it depends on the note that's before it. For example, to go from this G to this E flat, we have to go down a major third. And a major third is an alright interval. And to go from this E flat to this C, it's a minor third, and minor third is an alright interval. Now, there's only a few green notes and only a few red notes possible. There's 2 green intervals, the fifth, the perfect fifth, and the octave. And there's 2 dissonant intervals, the flat second, the half step, and the flat fifth, the tritone. And the rest are just blue notes, which is why we get so much blue here instead of green. This doesn't automatically mean that the red notes are dissonant. For example, this red note comes from a half step interval from this last note, but in reality it's just a minor third, and that's part of the chord, which is why it's not at all dissonant. It would make it a lot clearer if the arpeggio had larger intervals, but in this case it doesn't need them, and it kind of needs to make a reference to From Shadows, so it needs that second to minor third. The interesting thing is here in the second half, and this explains why it's dissonant. Even though the majority of these notes are actually part of the scale, the intervals between them are mostly dissonant, even more than here, right? So that's why the third quarter is more dissonant than the second quarter, because the intervals between the notes, which are still in the same scale, are more dissonant. We're talking about the intervals, first of all, between the minor third and the second, and we can prove that here, minor third and second, and the intervals between the second and the flat sixth, and we can prove that here. Minor third and second is a half step interval, and second and flat sixth is a flat fifth. It's not that Jeff is playing gibberish, but he's exploiting the dissonant intervals inside an existing normal scale to create this bluesy vibe. Now, where else have we seen this? That's right, the I Burn solo. Absolutely, you're all correct. Let's take a listen. This sounds like total gibberish, right? I've tried to put it in some ugly chords because it did sound like it was making arpeggios of flat fifth chords. So this is kind of what it sounds like. If you listen to the song, that's not what you're going to hear. What you're going to hear is probably this. This is assuming that there's an E power chord playing behind it, which it isn't. So it's still ambiguous, but this is, I think, the closest chord that we're gonna get. Now, as you can see down here, I've also used the C sharp. In the verse, we are in E, and in the chorus, we're in C sharp. That's why I chose those chords. There's a whole nice color code here, but what I'm interested in is this, which is how the notes relate to the notes before. We get lots of tritones, and that's really the source of all the dissonance, just the tritones. We get like a octave sharp here, which is pretty dissonant. It's kind of like a half step, but an octave below. Well, this is the ugliest interval, just because it has so many flat fifths and flat seconds. Now, if we take a look at this playing over E, we can see that all the tritones stem from the sixth and the minor third, apart from the occasional flat second and fifth. Even the ugly bit I was talking about earlier, it relies on flat third and sixth. This relies on the second and flat sixth, while this relies on the flat third and the sixth. Now, about that C sharp notation, if you want to check it out, it's on my Patreon. I'm gonna put all this sheet music on Patreon just for you guys to explore. I want to point out some cool things about the rest of Nevermore. There's a blues scale playing here. What we have here is literally just a blues scale ascending melody. I like how the last note also relates in a nice way to the chord that's playing under it. Yeah, so a nice characteristic of the blues scale is that it has the flat fifth. It's subtly implementing Yang's musical ideas into Blake's musical ideas, because Blake is a lot about piano, arpeggios and scales. Yang is, I'd say, moderately about dissonance, not too much. For example, her burn solo, because, you know, she's meant to exceed people's expectations and stuff, so I understand that. I also like how Jeff puts emphasis on the second degree of the key in the verse. So, for example, if we look at this last chord has a second playing. So this is C and this is D. And it's just more colorful. Right after that, we get an octave on D. Boo. Which is so good. I love the fact that Jeff values the second interval as a good, colorful interval. There's a verse here that lacks drums. And that kind of reminds me of Armed and Ready, because in one of the verses, the drums stop and just play like crashes and kicks to leave more space for like harmony and stuff. The rhythm has taken a back seat. It's kind of a stretch, but it might possibly be a reference.
Now it's time for the lyrics.
Nevermore is the first reference. The title is a reference to Evermore, which is a song from the Disney movie Beauty and the Beast. Anima Mask is the one who helped me find out, so thank you. In the chorus, we get Nevermore, you'll torture my heart and my head, which I thought was pretty similar to the I'm Ready lyric. My mind repeats the scene, I can't forget it, and it's torture. It uses the same verb here. And it's talking about heart and head, but this is talking about mind. Freedom is finally here. This is kind of a stretch, but now I've been set free from I'm Ready, because it talks about freedom from our mental trauma. You talk to subjugation. In Adam's verse from Shadows, he says, born with no life into subjugation. This is Yang's verse in Nevermore. You think you're someone's hero, which is a reference to Lionized, where Adam says, I'm their hero. And then she says, you're hiding more than your eyes. It's kind of a stretch, because it's kind of obvious that he's hiding his eyes, but it could also be a reference to I'm Ready. I can't forget the hidden eyes that I can feel there. I challenge a weak manifesto. The goal of a savior is not to be lionized. That's a reference to lionized. Back when it started, all we wanted was a chance to have equal life. I thought that justice was your goal. This is the same lyric, because I think Blake is singing this in From Shadows. When it started, all we wanted was a chance to live our lives. And it's kind of a very justice-oriented goal. And the fact that Blake mentions justice in this verse is kind of reminiscent of how she portrays Adam when she's talking to Sun in Volume 5, Chapter... She said, at first I thought Adam was justice. Then he was passion, but then he was fight. Then in darkness. So back when it started, then in darkness, now in darkness. Not only is it referencing the words of the verse, but also the structure of the verse. This is talking about the same period of time, so the same past, but instead of focusing on Faunus' justice, it's focusing on Blake and Adam's relationship. I'm more like an army now. Now, someone said where is it? Winklum helps me, saying, I'm more like an army now. Might be a reference to Armed and Ready. Don't remember exactly which, but I thought it was right, but unfortunately, I hadn't found anything about Armed and Ready. However, I'm more like an army now, and Armed and Ready share something that they might be arm jokes. Get it? LOL. Okay, apart from that, it's my turn to take back what you stole. That's a blatant reference to From Shadows. We'll take back what you stole. But this is talking about humans, while Blake here is talking about Adam. And this Diamond's Mother is a reference to what Yang said in chapter 12 from volume 6. She might not be faster, but she's smarter than she was at Beacon, which symbolizes her development, going from a very rough fighter to yeah, well, you know what I mean. Not dying now, we're protecting our own, which references Blake, how she says we're protecting each other in chapter 11. Another soul consumed by hate and spite. Here we have the word spite. It's an important word because Blake associates Adam with spite. She thought he was justice, then she thought he was passion, but he's just spite. This word also appears in This Time. It's time we change the spite to love. Yay! Into Shadow Straight, which is a reference to all the shadow motifs, not leitmotifs, that happen in Blake's songs. And he'll see the light of day. And I thought this was a This Time reference, but Tainted Scholar helped me, saying that it's definitely not a reference to This Time. Tainted Scholar helped me understand that he'll see the light of day Nevermore. There's a chorus after that, and it starts with Nevermore. So he'll see the light of day nevermore. So he'll never see the light of day anymore. Thank you, Tainted Scholar, for dealing with my stupidity. Yeah, I'd like to thank everyone who helped me on Reddit. I posted the lyrics with all these references on Reddit, and some people helped me improve on that. So I'd like to thank Anima Mask, Winklum, Food for Comfort just gave me moral support, which is still appreciated. High Priest Funeral says that the line in Armed and Ready that says, "Your song will be lament, my happy ever after," is foreshadowing Nevermore. So like, your song will be lament. Arthur's Beardbone says it's the Adam diss track, and it's totally true. Some of you might be thinking, why did it take so long to post another music analysis video? Well, there's no reason at all. There's no reason at all. You can make my effort not worthless, and you can go on Patron and check out all of the sheet music I had to make for this video. You can also access all the sheet music I made for like Tyrion's theme, Cinder's theme, All Things Must Die, Raven's theme. I'm so glad you guys are here to check out the things I have to say about this stuff. I love doing this stuff. And if you love it, nothing stops you from checking out my channel and picking something you like. See you later.